because drama will ensue, right? So this is a very typical behavior, because what those toddlers are seeking is autonomy. They can do it themselves, and they want to do it themselves, right? So needs are added as children grow. So we're familiar with the special needs pyramid that everybody has, and it was, of course, developed by Maslow, a very good children's psychologist. And it starts, of course, with the physiological needs. So we already talked about the physiological needs that a child has: warmth, safety, comfort, and food, right? But then, of course, safety in general, being loved by parents, and then belonging into a family, into a church, belonging into a special group, into their own niche where they know that they are at home. Now, of course, esteem, self-esteem, and then finally self-actualization, which means they have mastered their own autonomy, and they can do and make their own decisions. Now, self-actualization is, according to Maslow, the one need that has to be fulfilled last, because all the other needs, as you see in this nice pyramid, take precedence. So, of course, safety and physiological needs have to be met first. However, Maslow's pyramid is being disputed a little bit at the moment, because people clearly have mastery and agency even if they don't have all their needs met. So we have to be careful when we use this pyramid, but it does lead us in the right track of what needs there are. Now, if we look at ourselves as human beings, we have needs, but again, not all needs can be met at the same time. And the problem is now, when not all those needs that we have are met, then our life doesn't work out very well. So we all have needs for safety, for security, for food, for autonomy, for freedom. Now, when any of these needs are not met or taken away, then of course we're not feeling very well, and it does affect our mood, and we feel unfulfilled. So when we're hungry and we have a need for food, but there isn't any, we can get quite grumpy, right? So I can get quite hangry, to be honest. So the theory is, and the framework that I'm going to introduce to you is a framework that includes those needs and takes every need into account. So we are on a path to inclusion. So first of all, when we are dealing with a tantruming toddler or with a child that acts up, when we are feeling in disharmony or not feeling quite well, we're probably familiar with phrases like this: enough is enough, right? Or I'm at my wit's end, or this was the straw that breaks the camel's back. We burn out, and finally we bail out, and the last reaction is exclusion. You have to wait in front of the door, you have to stand on one leg in the corner. This was my classic punishment when I was little, right? So this is usually something when we don't know how to handle a child's behavior, and we end up excluding them rather than including them. Now, here are different approaches with which we can handle this. So, self-care. Of course, we need to care for ourselves first. So, when you're flying in an airplane, what does the stewardess tell you in the beginning at the safety instructions about the oxygen masks? You put it on yourself first, because if you do not breathe, no one else will, right? You cannot help anybody else if you haven't put the oxygen mask on yourself. So the care for the parents and for the carers is important. Then, of course, we need to rebuild the safe space for everybody, for the parents and for the child. And, of course, we need to educate ourselves. We need to educate everybody who handles difficult situations: Sabbath school teachers, pastors, deacons, elders, everybody in the church. Okay, and we need to create a well-being plan and an inclusion plan that we finally manage to become the family that everybody so desperately needs. So when we listen to such phrases like children have behavioral problems, or they don't listen, this little girl, she always throws a tantrum, or he always wants to get his own way. These are typical phrases that we often say, that I've heard myself say a lot. Now, how can we actually handle this? Well, are you communicating in a way that they understand? So behavioral problems can sometimes just be based on misunderstandings. And then, of course, if children don't listen, maybe they are engaged in an activity that's important to them at this very moment. And I know, for example, Julian, he's in South Shields, my husband at the moment, he will join us later, but I remember when he was still wearing glasses and he used to put contact lenses in sometimes. And he was fiddling with those contact lenses, and it was a pain, and he's not very good with little fiddly things. And I would come in and ask him a question. I was not greeted with a lot of understanding, but he would be quite snappy. He's like, don't you see I'm doing something? So, and usually lose the contact lens in the process. So this is exactly how children sometimes react. They're doing something, they're painting, they're drawing, they're observing something, and then we want something and we want them to do whatever we ask them to do right now. Well, of course they snap, right? Because we do too. Now, when somebody or when a child wants its own way, don't we want our own way too? How do we deal with disappointment? How do we deal with it when our needs are not met? When somebody takes the last piece of cake right in front of our noses? So yesterday we were at the cake fair with my daughter, and it was to raise funds for the school, so we were there, and somebody snatched the last donut with pink glazing right from her nose and was there before her in the queue. And of course she started to cry, poor child. But this is just a normal reaction. It's just we hide it better because we're adults. Children just let it fly, right? Well, sometimes, right? So it is important to be empathetic and to show empathy. So we need to separate the child from the actual behavior. And of course, we need to be careful about our language and how we refer to things, okay? Because, and a very important child psychologist again, Biddulph, said, language can have an almost hypnotic effect and act unconsciously. So like seeds, we're putting seeds in the child's mind, seeds which will grow and shape the child's self-image and eventually becoming part of their personality. So this is serious, because when the way we're talking about children, the way we talk to children will shape them, will shape the way they will think and talk about themselves. Now, this was way back in the 80s in Germany, and the educational system there is very different from here. And I had a teacher, and he was not the nicest. And when I asked him a question, he would actually say to me, if I was as dumb as you, I would ask the same question. Unthinkable today, right? But this is sometimes what children encounter. And do we want to do we want to sow that seed into their minds like that? So we have to be very careful what we say and how we say it. So when we look at a child and the behavior of the child, we see the iceberg. And of course you can tell me, which is the behavior? What do we actually see? The behavior is right here. Oh, of course this doesn't work on the screen. So the behavior is those 5% of the iceberg that we can actually see, right? So this is what we can perceive of the child. The behavior is acting out, not doing what we say, but what's actually going on below the surface. We don't see this. And we have to be careful. So what will change if we only aim to change the behavior? Do we actually have a positive influence on a child, or do we just scratch the surface and and still are unable to make a real connection. So what really matters in our interaction are the child's thoughts and feelings, and the needs and the perspectives, the motives and the values. And what matters is not the behavior, but the person who does the behaving and why they do that behaving. So we can never forget this, that what lies under the surface is what matters most. So today I'm introducing to you the Phoenix Cups framework. This framework was conceived in Australia. It is an Australian education framework, and I'm fascinated by it. It is peer-reviewed. It has been developed by Sandy Phoenix. Her name is actually Phoenix. This is why it's called the Phoenix Cups. A psychologist and educator who has been studying Maslow and Glasser and all the famous child psychologists that said there's something missing in our communication with children. And what I really appreciate about this framework is that it rings very familiar, and you will see soon enough what happens. So of course, you have to imagine that we all have needs. We have certain cups. So imagine all your needs are cups. So we have 5 cups here: the mastery cup, the safety cup, freedom cup, connection cup, and the fun cup. Now all our behaviors aim to meet those needs and to fill those cups. When the cups are full, we have a strong sense of well-being, we're fine, we're serene, we're calm. But when even just one of those cups is empty, we're driven to choose a certain behavior that fills those cups. So each cup represents a basic human life need, and every behavior is an attempt to fill this cup. So let's look into those cups more closely. We have the safety cup, which deals with the physiological safety, of course, and even the psychological safety. Is our health and our wellness cup. And safety is also the need for predictability and for trust. And with our behavior, we aim to achieve a feeling of security. So I'm just asking you, what makes you feel safe? What makes you feel safe in your everyday life?
We can apply this to
everyone, yes.
My bed. My bed.
Your bed makes you feel safe. Excellent. See, no, it's true. It's true. Actually, it will come up in a slide later on. Very good. Comfy pillows are a very good way to make us feel safe. Sorry, and very good. Yes, and
spending one at one time.
Spending one at one time. Yes, hugs, cuddles. That also helps. Yes. Well, living in a house, having a roof over your head makes you feel safe, right?
No.
Well, sometimes, right? Food makes you feel safe. Okay. So comfort food, or eating for comfort, eating chocolate, is a typical behavior that we show when we don't feel quite safe and when we crave more security. Okay, so having a routine and a structure makes us feel safe. Okay, the next one is the connection cup. Of course, everybody has a need for connection, belonging, love, acceptance, inclusion, being taken up in a family. So with this behavior, that where we crave connection, we aim to achieve self-worth. And what better way to feel worthy, to have self-esteem is when you say you're worthy, you're loved, I love you. Children will just start smiling and say, oh, that's great. People with problems, with a low self-esteem, maybe they haven't been told very often that they are loved. And as a church, this is our mission, to tell people first and foremost that they are loved. We talked about love today, right? So love and being a child of God gives us this feeling of self-worth. And it is beautiful. Now, the next need is, of course, the need for freedom. Freedom is important. Freedom to do what I want to do, but also freedom from oppression, from things that I don't want to do, right? It gives me agency, it gives me choice and liberty. And by having freedom, of course, I will get a feeling of autonomy. So when children want to do things themselves, it's sometimes very hard to watch. and it's sometimes very, very stressful. And when we watch them pour a glass of water, we're just there, But when they have achieved this and when they manage, the smile on their faces, it's just beautiful. So children who want to do things themselves, they crave this feeling of autonomy. And of course, then following that is immediately the mastery cup. We have a need for mastery, a need for self-competence. I can do this. I need a feeling of achievement, of efficacy, of control, and of empowerment. So empowerment is beautiful. When you say to somebody that you can do this, they usually can, right? Because it's this kind of empowerment that we all crave. Now, I like here the description is people who have a very strong mastery cup or need for mastery usually don't shy away from a challenge and don't necessarily argue with people. They're just really good at explaining why they're right. And that is true. When I argue, I usually just explain to you why I'm right. Because I have a very strong need for mastery. But then, of course, children also have a fun cup, and everybody does. Play, humor, pleasure, learning, stimulation. So with this behavior, we aim to achieve a feeling of joy. Because who doesn't want to feel joy? So children are very often, they say, or at least Lena says it to me a lot, I'm bored. Because our fun cup is empty, and of course, I'm trying my best. But sometimes it's important that children are bored and they learn how to fill that fun cup themselves. But we'll get to those strategies later. So everybody has these cups, right? But what nature or God has equipped us with is the size of the cup. So all have those cups, but some people have bigger cups and smaller cups. So I have a very big mastery cup and a very big freedom cup. Now those often clash, unfortunately. My mother for sure has a very strong safety cup. Okay, so she needs to know that everything is safe and she needs to have her routines, okay? So everybody has their own needs and every child has their own needs. It's just how big those cups are is the way they were born and genetically equipped. So, of course, fulfilling those needs is part of self-care. Now, self-care is not a luxury. Self-care is a priority, which means our behaviors aim to fill our needs, to fulfill our needs. So when we have our cups, okay, we need to fill them. Fulfillment is the active acknowledgement and the acceptance that there is an empty part in our needs cup. And we have to be grateful for what is already in that cup. So not all cups are completely empty. So we need to learn gratefulness for all those cups that are full. Okay. So when we look at our cups and we say one is emptying, one is filling, which is good, we also need to find the will to fill those cups, right? We have the will to fill our needs, but we also need to have the skill to fill those cups. Now, when I talk about the skill to fill, I need to go back to the comfort food, because feeling unsafe or feeling stressed, burned out, when we've been working too hard and we're just really exhausted, we want to have this feeling of comfort, right? And unfortunately, a lot of behaviors that try to fill this are shortcuts. So when we talk about comfort food, or we're sad, or we feel lonely, and we need some connection, we eat a tub of ice cream, that is not great behavior and not healthy behavior. So we need to develop the skill to fill those empty cups with healthy behavior that is good for us. And this is exactly what we also need to instill in our children. So the fulfillment and the will and the skill is something that can be learned and can be understood. So the will to fill is an unconscious internal driver that motivates us to choose our behavior to fulfill that special need. And it doesn't matter which dominant cup we have, mastery, safety, connection, the empty cup will always be a priority until it is full again. So when a child feels lonely and doesn't see mom anywhere, that child, it doesn't matter how many toys there are around the child and whether it's been fed or not, that child will cry until it sees mom again, right? Just because that one need for connection is not fulfilled at this moment. So the behavior to fill that need is a priority in that moment. Now the will to fill this cup is an unconscious driver to get our needs met. And of course we need to develop a skill set to fill our cups. And especially in children need to learn those skills too. Because their parents are usually responsible for filling their cups, for meeting their needs, but eventually children will have to learn to self-soothe, to sleep in their own bed. They will have to learn to be bored and to sit with that feeling for a while without the need to be entertained constantly. So these are skills that we have to guide them to meet those needs. So filling our cups with thoughtless behavior, that will not offer us a lasting sense of fulfillment. So when Albulena tells me I'm bored, and I hand her my phone so she can play some games, that is not skillful behavior, okay? Because this is how I fulfill a momentary need, but not a lasting need for coping on her own and developing her own sense of creativity and what she can do with that feeling. So it's a skill set that has to be learned, and it's a skill set that we have to teach our children. So when we say children are attention-seeking, well, maybe they're not attention-seeking, okay? This little girl says, my behavior is my best attempt to meet one of my needs. But perhaps I need your connection because you can help me work out which cup needs filling and how I can best do that here. And yes, this is as parents, this is our calling. We need to find out what need must be met at this moment. Sometimes we just see a child that's acting out and we don't know why. Well, it's up to us to find out why. So we need to develop a plan. Everything is good with a plan. I like planning. I'm German. I need a plan. A plan is a good thing. So what is a cup filling plan? It is important for our well-being and everybody's well-being really to reflect on what we need in those cups, to make plans to ensure that all our cups are getting filled equally. So when all cups are full, we feel great. And of course, empty cups create a sense of disharmony in our life. So being thoughtful and intentional about the choices, how we can meet those needs, how we can fill our cups, increases our skill to fill. So children are not attention-seeking. We know they seek mastery, they seek safety, they seek freedom and fun and connection with us. These are our basic human needs. So our behavior at any given point in time is our best attempt, given the resources that are at our disposal, to meet those needs. So children seek first connection and safety. Most of all, they are born, right? And this is we established already in our conversation. Children seek connection and safety, but through their years, they seek mastery and freedom, and of course, fun. And we have to understand that fun is a basic human need. And I know a lot of children would like to have fun rather than sitting still. But guess what? Once that fun cup is full, they have no problems sitting still. That fun cup is not a cup that runs empty all the time. We just have to have it filled with fun, thoughtful activities. And then once that fun cup is full, then we can interact in a good way. So through their first years, they seek mastery, freedom, and fun. But of course, they're still learning a skill to fill and may choose behaviors that are not expected, sometimes not appropriate, and they affect other people and empty other people's cups So when children argue and take stuff away from each other, that fulfills their own need, but it empties the cup of their playmate, right? So instead of trying to change the behavior of the child that is acting out, we have to have a plan and create a cup-filling plan. Now the plan is here, it's important that we understand this. Children do not require punishment or positive reinforcement or controlling discipline, but children do require support to develop the skills, to choose the behaviors that are more considerate and more cooperative to meet their needs. So again, let's look at those needs again. Mastery is the need for self-confidence and safety. It's the need for security. Freedom is the need for autonomy. Connection is the need for self-worth. And of course, fun is the need for joy in our lives. Now, let's do an activity, a bit of brainstorming, and I know the children are over there filling their fun cups, I'm sure. So what behavior can you witness in a child that doesn't have a certain need met? What are the behaviors that you usually can see and that you watch?
Frustration.
Frustration, yes. How does frustration look? Crying. Screaming. Stomping, yes. Yeah. Throwing things, I know. I've thrown a few things myself. I still throw things, to be honest. Anyway, so what do you know about the child or the adult in that case? What do you actually know? So it's good that you say frustration, because you're already one step ahead because you're a parent. So you know those child is not just behaving in a terrible way, but you know it's frustration that's driving this behavior. So well done, gold star right here. So what do you know about the child? You can actually watch this. If something doesn't work out, if there's a need not met, then you can see a certain behavior. And it is up to you to work out what kind of need there is. So I know, for example, and this is what Albulena has inherited from her dad, for sure. When she is hungry, she is not in a good mood. It actually, and this advice actually has saved our marriage. So very, very early on in our engagement, Juliet and I, we made the decision never to argue when we're hungry. And actually, this has served us well. This was actually one of the very few rules that we established. Okay, we're in a bad mood, we find something wrong with each other at every turn. Let's eat something, and then let's revisit that. And usually that solves the problem. Why? Because Julian doesn't notice when he's hungry. I notice when he's hungry. And it's the same with Albulena. When she is hungry, I know. She won't know. So we're learning now the skill a little bit to say, well, if you're not in a good mood, if you feel you're not in a good place, just listen to yourself. I say, listen to your tummy. What does your tummy tell you? Are you thirsty? Are you hungry? Are you cold? Are you hot? Is there anything that you need to do to fulfill your physical needs? And then usually she gets it and she's like, yes, I actually need something. And then we can talk in a constructive way. But it is up to us to teach children the skill to listen to themselves. What is the need that needs fulfilling right now? But it's up to us also to discover these needs in other children. What cups do we perceive as empty? Now, as parents and as educators and as Sabbath school teachers and as church members, what skills do I have to fill these cups? Now, I know parents will probably not like this, but we all have this natural instinct to help and to step in and to be with children, right? So when we see a child that's frustrated, usually, we flock there and we say, here, have a sweet, or here, have something to drink, or here, I have a little toy for you, and everybody is trying something else until the mother usually goes, stop! I know what's wrong, you don't know, don't tell me. So we need to practice our own skills, of course, to interfere when it's appropriate and when it's wanted and when it's needed, okay? But we also need to discover what are healthy skills. So sometimes And of course, yes, this is a disputed thing, letting children cry. Well, it is a way of teaching them the skill to self-soothe, okay? So, but I'm not discussing this here because there are many different schools of thoughts, and I'm not letting children cry. But this is a different way, a skill set that we teach children. Now, here's the thing. When I want to pick up where Pastor Patricia left off today in her sermon. What I loved so much about it was that when God spent this time with Moses on Mount Sinai, it was beautiful, and the way she presented it, he spent 40 days on Mount Sinai, right? 3 months. He had a connection. He built a connection with Moses. He told Moses he wants to have a relationship with the people of Israel. He wanted everybody to be a priest, right? So God tried very hard to build this relationship. And only then he gave them the 10 Commandments, right? So before God put up the rules, he built a relationship with his people. Now, this is something that we should really learn about. So before we correct a child, we need to connect with the child, right? So we need to counterbalance correction with connection. And how often do we say, listen to me? Right? Every exclamation mark is a little bit of a negative interaction. Stop throwing sand. Get down from here. Keep your hands to yourself. And that's enough now. But we need to, we remember the quote from earlier, right? Our language, we have to watch our language. Now, everything that we say has to be balanced out with connection. So if we say we have 5 negative interactions, we also need to have 5 positive interactions. We need to say, wow, what are you drawing here? This looks beautiful. Oh, look at your shoes. They're so shiny and it's so blinky. And well done what you've done today in Sabbath school. You recited the memory verse. So we need to counterbalance every correction with a connection-seeking behavior. Otherwise, the children will just not listen, because all we become then is shushers, right? But first, we need to have the connection. So children usually listen to somebody they feel safe with and they feel loved by. So here's a cup filling plan, and this is a bit of an exercise. And I'm happy to send you this these handouts by email as well. So you have a cup. Imagine your own cup a little bit. So what is your favorite need? Right now, everybody's need is a nap or probably a walk, right? This is our, let's fill our safety cup, our comfort cup. Okay, so this is something that we can all learn. So we imagine our cup. And then how do I know when this cup of mine is empty? Okay, what empties my cup? I know, patience, right? So when I'm at the end of my tether, my cup is empty and I snap. So I know by my own behavior when my cup is empty. So how do I feel when I notice that any of my cups are emptying? How do I feel? And then of course, what is currently filling this cup? And this is a very important step. So you write down here what right now fills this cup. And this is the step of gratefulness. I'm thankful, and I can say, thank you, God. I know this cup is not very full right now, but you're doing your best to provide for me. And thank you what you have already done for me to fill this cup. But then we need to think about healthy behaviors, how we can fill this cup more, to make it full, to feel well again. Now I've done this already a little bit for you. So let's assume this is the safety cup. Okay, let's say, well, right now these are troubled times. We always say these are troubled times, it's a post-pandemic times, the financial crisis. Not many of us feel safe, right? So how do we feel when we don't feel safe? Well, usually we feel we have a need for security, okay? So we put down here security, and we feel maybe exhaustion or overwhelmed, anxiety, brain fog, palpitations, right? We can feel when we're not feeling safe at the very moment. So what is already in the cup? What do we still have that we can be grateful for? Well, maybe we do have a job, maybe not a very good one, but at least a predictable one. Maybe we have a comfy bed and pillows. That is something that makes us feel safe, okay? Maybe I do have a trusting relationship with my partner, and this is very important for us to feel safe. Now, I need to fill this cup with behavior that makes me feel better, but not with eating a tub of ice cream, not with eating chocolate, not with all kinds of things that are just giving us a short-term benefit, but are very healthy behaviors. I need to develop skills to make me feel well and healthy and safe. And of course, that could be increasing the exercise, taking a walk 30 minutes every day, developing a routine, an exercise routine, which helps us to get our hormonal imbalance back into balance, right? Having a meat-free Monday, doing something for our health. Well, if you don't do a meat-free life, then I do recommend the meat-free Mondays. Mindfulness and prayer, being grateful, praying to God, building a relationship with our Creator, that can fill our safety cup. Sleep, increasing our sleep, of course, and of course creating our boundaries, turning off the phone 1 hour before bedtime, or actually saying, you know what, I need some space for myself. So all these things can be skills that help us feel safer. And of course, let's do this exercise. Let's fill this cup for our children. Now, this is something that we have to teach our children. So what would a safety cup for a child look like? How does a child behave that doesn't feel safe at the moment? You tell me.
Timid.
Timid, yes. Mm-hmm.
Anxious.
Anxious. How do they usually act?
Irrational.
Irrational, yes.
No eye
Anger,
contact.
often.
Mm-hmm.
Like outbursts.
Could be outbursts, yes, that's right.
They seek safety from others.
They seek safety from others, yes. Well, Abuelina, when she's scared, she hides in the bathtub. When I know something is up, I know I find her in the bathtub. She's sitting in there going like this. So this is behavior that is clearly not feeling safe, okay? So we need to learn to recognize behavior when children do not feel well cared for. So again, a toddler that sits on the floor playing happily, but mommy is not there, they cry. So it doesn't matter whether we give that toddler anything to play with or something to eat. If mommy is not there, nothing helps, okay? Because the safety cup that needs to be filled. So what skills do children already have to feel safer? They already have, or rationally know that their parents are there for them. God loves them. They have a roof over their head. It's okay, okay? This is something that children need to be told repeatedly every day. Mommy loves you. If I'm here or in the bathroom or in the kitchen or at work, it doesn't matter. I love you anyway, even if you can't see me. This is something we need to tell them every single day, just so they understand that this is. So when I say Abuelina in the morning, when I do the school, when I say, Abuelina, I love you, and she says, yeah, Mommy, tell me all the time. I know I've done it. So this is a good one because I filled that cup. Right? So what are safe behaviors that we can teach a child to feel better, to feel safer? Instead of crying, instead of hiding. What are behaviors? Okay, and this is something that children learn in school a lot. So when children are being bullied, what do they learn? To stand up to bullies, to say, you know, you cannot say this to me, don't talk to me like this, okay? Because being bullied is something that empties the safety cup pretty quickly, okay?
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Very quickly. I mean, in a situation where the child is being bullied and they don't stand up, they have the exact opposite. You know, they cower away,
That's
or
right.
they put up with it, and internalize all that problem.
Mm-hmm.
How do we?
Well,
I'm
we
not
need
asking for a solution here,
Yeah.
but you understand
Exactly.
the opposite to that.
Yeah, so this is the thing. The more we tell children they're dumb, they're ugly, they're pain, the more they start believing it. Well, if I send my child to school knowing that they're smart, that they're pretty, that they're amazing, whatever that bully is going to say, they say, no, that's not true. Right? So we need to counteract it, and this is where we have a calling as a church, right? Yeah. So we need to fill that safety cup up to the brim, and then anybody else who tries to empty that cup, they can go home, right? So this is the skill that we can give children. I'll never forget, it was last, it was I can't remember, at a camp meeting, and the caterer was there, and it was a very tall, intimidating lady, and no meal ticket, you wouldn't get your meal, right? So this was very, very well organized, of course. You needed to have your meal ticket in order to get your meal. Now, I was there with the counselors from Cornerstone, and there was a very, very nice counselor, very nice lady, Sister T, and she was about so high, but she was a counselor for teenagers against bullying. And she went up, she had forgotten her meal ticket in the hotel. And we said, oh, you're not going to get a meal. And she says, no, wait for it. So this very intimidating dinner lady stood there. No meal for you. And she just stood up and said, I forgot my meal ticket in the hotel. What are you going to do about it? She got her meal, right? And I thought, and just this little lady, she had so much power behind herself. I could see suddenly she was much taller than anybody else, right? Because she had this energy about her. And I thought, you know what? If my child ever needs counseling, it's going to be her. Right? So this is wonderful, and this is a great example. We need to fill that cup, okay? So children can weather any storm, and that's the same for the fun cup, for the mastery cup. So how do we do this? How do we interact with a child that is acting out at the moment? And I know it's frustrating, but we do have a calling here, how to act appropriately, not to empty that cup even more. So the simple strategy here is to say what you see, and then to ask a question. So to listen with full attention, to acknowledge the feelings, to describe what we see and describe the problem, to give information about it, to talk about our feelings, and to provide choices. Now that sounds very technical and very weird. Well, imagine this scene. A little boy climbs the bookcase. So we say, no, get down there. Don't climb the bookcase. Well, instead we can say, you know what, the bookcase looks a bit wobbly because you're climbing on it. Do you think there could be a safer place where you could practice your climbing that's not on the bookcase? Now, that's a very positive interaction. I'm not sure if I would be able to do that in the moment. I have caught myself not to react, but this is where we also have to learn this skill to interact in a way that doesn't scare children away. And I know Albulina is very sensitive there. She always starts crying immediately. She says, I'm sorry. And I say, okay, and I'm sorry, and then everybody cries. So what I really have to learn here is to say, you know what, I can see that this is probably not the safest way to do whatever you're doing. Maybe you could do whatever you're doing outside or in a better way. So just try to interact and make a connection first and actually show some interest. Of course, if it's in the interest of safety, you have to act quickly. So if you say, well, maybe it's not safe to cross the road right now because you see there's a truck coming over, So basically we need to actually act appropriately and fast in certain situations, okay? But it is important to have a connection with a child. So how can I fill a child with self-confidence, security, autonomy, and joy? How can I fill a child with self-worth? And this is important. I need to ask myself questions. I just reflect. How do I communicate respect for a child? Do I actually respect a child? Do I maintain a child's dignity? So here, in terms of dignity and respect, I remember I was a missionary for a very long time in Albania, and when I was working with this very special ADRA project, I was country director at the time, and we had developed a project to increase literacy in adult women. to enable them to have a job and to have a bit more empowerment. But is that what happened here was we empowered the women, and suddenly they learned how to talk to their own children. So before, it was a Roma community of travelers, and before children didn't really have a status in that community. So the only thing children would usually hear until they were about this high, they would hear, go away, go, you're in the way. So this is the only thing that they would actually say to their kids. They were like a chicken running around, but they didn't really have any interaction, any connection. And what happened was, once these women learned how to have self-respect, self-worth, once their own cups of self-worth was filled, they realized those children had the same cups. And they needed that same interaction, that same dignity and respect that they had just learned about. So this was a wonderful project. All those kids came to school and they learned reading and writing. It was beautiful to watch how this community started blooming. But this is exactly what we're talking about. Whatever I do, will it communicate how I respect the child? Will it maintain the dignity of the child? Will it increase the ability to use more effective behavior in the future? Will it help the child to recognize that they have choices and that there are other choices available? And of course, most importantly, will it strengthen my relationship in the long term? Will it show empathy for the child's perspective? And of course, will it maintain and enhance the child's self-esteem? And will it reflect values, fairness, compassion, integrity, and sensitivity? Now, we think, this is so much. But you know what? Think of our Father. Think of our Father in heaven. And let's look at the Bible. Let's look at every single letter that the Apostle Paul writes. The Apostle Paul shows empathy. He says, I'm human, I'm a murderer, but look, I made it. The Apostle Paul builds a relationship. He goes and visits every church for years and builds relationships with people before he starts admonishing. Okay? He says, you are loved, God loves you. There is no condemnation for you because you're in Christ Jesus, he wrote in the letter to the Romans, right? But he says also, because you're free in Christ, you're following the law. So it's beautiful. And if God works with us this way as his children, why don't we work like this with our children? We need to emulate his image. We need to emulate how he interacts with us. We need to have the connection with the child before we start the correction. And of course, it is a lot of work. It is a calling and it takes practice. Okay, but the very famous man said, it always seems impossible until it is done. So thank you very much for your attention. And I do hope you could take a little bit away. I'm very happy to share more resources about this. So if you have any questions, ask away. Yes.
Thanks for the presentation, and I find it very interesting because my background, I was a health visitor. One of my specialities was child behaviour and how to respond to child behaviour. But I was thinking, and it's good that you talked about the Bible and how Paul interrelates with the people, but I was thinking more, how does this ideology, it's a theory, how does this relate to the Bible, how does it relate to the spirit of prophecy, especially with extensive guidance on child guidance in the spirit of prophecy and some of the things that Sister White talked about, how we should be raising the children. I just wondered if you considered that.
Well, this framework is of course a secular framework. It is not an Adventist framework, but it does deal with the needs, with our special needs that we all have. So it is a psychological framework, of course. Well, Sister White has of course her own views on child's education. And of course, I grew up with messages to young people, and I think it is wonderful that we as a church can supply the safe space. But it is important that we reflect, what the Bible teaches us about education. What does Jesus say? He says, don't shout at the kids, but let them come to me. Even Jesus seeks the connection to the children before the correction. So of course, all the correction is needed. The exhortation is needed, yes. But But before we go with that, we need to build a loving relationship. And once we have that loving relationship, then we can start with all that is important, because we want to keep our kids straight. We want to keep them on the path, right? And this is important. So it's not a laissez-faire framework. It's just giving us the opportunity to look into ourselves. How can we portray the values that we want those children to grow up with? Yes?
Are you able to parent effectively if your needs as a child are not met? So you've gone through life in half empty cups. How do you fill cups from an empty cup? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So when your own childhood wasn't that great and you went through some personal trauma, or you had other things to worry about, then how can you recognize this need? Well, this is why self-care for parents is so important, and learning about yourself. So of course, for example, just very close to home, my own mother, she was a child from a divorced parent. It was wartime when she grew up. It was a very unsafe environment. She was a refugee until she was 14. So she had a big backpack of trauma. And of course, it was very difficult for her to instill this. So of course, right now, she still has these needs, and some of them are irrational. So she doesn't take left turns. She's somehow scared about left turns. So she has certain behaviors that try to make her feel safe, just because she didn't have that safety when she grew up. And of course, she passed that on to us. So I was not allowed to ride a bicycle until I was well in my teens. So some of these things are very, very difficult, but it is important to self-reflect, to learn this about yourself, to remember how it was for me, and maybe then seek counseling and really work on this, and say, how can I not pass on my own trauma, but how can I make my child feel safe, even though I never felt safe? So it is a very important basic need to self-reflect, and then seek counseling, seek help, and really work on that trauma response and not to pass it on.
Is it possible to fill those cups as adults, or is it too late?
No.
It has to be done when you're a child by your parents, or can you as an adult find ways to fill your cup?
Absolutely, it is definitely possible to fill your own cups, but again, you need to have the skill for it. You need to develop the skill. So again, some people, like my mother, through her irrational fear of left turns, it is not a good skill just not to turn left to feel safer, because she will. I'm not kidding you. She takes a very long time to get from A to B. But basically, it is irrational behavior, and sometimes you just need to reflect whether our behaviors are actually effective in filling that cup or not. So we need to replace that ineffective, irrational, and sometimes unhealthy behavior in order to. We need to replace that with a healthy behavior in order to have proper safety. And of course, this is where we turn to God and we turn to prayer, but self-reflection and counseling. We have brothers and sisters in church. We can talk about these things. We have friends that probably grew up with us. So we know God, who knows us intimately. So we do have this opportunity for reflection, that we can pass this on and manage to fill our own needs and to fulfill our own needs. Yes.
I was just going to ask if you thought that always having like a kid's cup full. So, for example, it's good to reassure your kids, but for example, if you're like constantly saying to a kid, you're so pretty, you're so beautiful, or like constantly keeping them out of harm's way because they don't really understand how to take risks themselves, do you think that it has more of a negative impact than a positive impact?
Well, spoiling children is of course not a great thing, because children need to learn the skill to fulfill their needs themselves at some point. So it's our calling, and it's our duty to teach them healthy skills. So I think you can never tell a child enough that it's loved. children always need to know that they're loved. This is important, and they can't hear it enough. But we cannot buy them toys every day. We cannot entertain them 24 hours. Okay, so we cannot let them do everything by themselves, obviously. Okay, so there needs to be a balance, but we need to know that there's some choice. So very simple thing. If children need to learn, need to fulfill the need for autonomy, for freedom, give them some choice. Okay, so when I say to my daughter, you know what, get dressed today, but not what I want you to, but I give you the choice between a red t-shirt and a blue t-shirt, and you choose between the red and the blue. You don't give them the choice between everything, and then they go to school in a terrible way. But you say, you give some choice. So step by step with little things that give them some sort of agency and mastery over their situation.
So how would you, I don't know, example, but yeah, so how do you, so for example, if you don't want your kid to come out vain, how would you balance a cup? So would you only like reassure them on Tuesdays or like every other day, or how would you go about that?
Well, vanity is of course not a great thing to have, but vanity comes from a different vanity. I would say comes from a need of not having been reassured enough.
Okay.
So I mean this is how I would interpret it. So if somebody spends hours and hours in front of a mirror, it's probably a mental health issue right there that we have to address. But knowing that they're fine the way they are, knowing that they don't need to look a certain way in order to be accepted, that is important, and this is what we as parents need to give them. So a body positive image. It doesn't matter if you're tall or small or big or thin. It doesn't matter at all because you're loved anyway. This is the opposite of vanity, I would argue. So this is something that we do as a parent have to instill.
But how would you go about that? Is this my question?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you apply that in your everyday day?
Well, for example, Elena, she is small for her age. so all the other kids that she plays with at the same age, she's just smaller. That's just how it is. But we say, well, everybody is different. Everybody is diverse, So you're not the only small child in the world. There are others. You're probably the only small child in this setting. But you're still okay, and you have other qualities that you can fall back on. You can probably not jump very high or throw very far, but it doesn't matter because that doesn't define who you are. So it is important to be positive about everything, to say that this doesn't define you and you're okay and you're loved the way you are. Yeah.
Okay, so to Thea's question, and then also I think to what Sister Lucy was saying, I'm going to use a practical example to try to rationalize all of this. We have Sister White who says when children, let's say they come to church, or no matter how young they are, don't give them anything to play with, anything to color with, because as they grow up, they will eventually not get accustomed to listening to God's word. They need to be entertained. But then on the other hand, the framework would suggest that you have to try to find a balance, because then they might not like church because they see it as boring, or you have to find ways that they feel secure here. So the fact that you have to sit still for a period of time is too much. How then do you balance the two? Because one person will say, well, give them something to color. This is a debate we have in our church. We have in our church. Give them something to write in color. Once they're writing and coloring something about God, if it's a picture of Noah, then it's better than nothing. But Sister White said nothing. So how do we balance spirit of prophecy with secular theories? And
they're both right. You see, because the needs that children have, so let's say the fun cup, the need for fun, for entertainment, for joy, it doesn't need to be met in church necessarily, but it has to be met in general. So if children come joyful to church, they can sit still. But if they were sitting still all week in school, nobody took them to the park, Nobody went for a walk with them. Nobody let them jump around. Before they can sit down and they have to sit still again, they will have a very hard time. So I do believe that concentration is very necessary. But the good thing is about fulfilling the needs. They don't have to be fulfilled at the same time all the time. They just need to be fulfilled at some point. And once the needs are fulfilled, then it is easier to sit still and focus on what is important. What is our duty here? If a child is acting up in church, let's say, instead of just saying, sit still now, we need to think, okay, what is your need? What was the need that was not fulfilled before this child came to church? Is there something going on? Were your parents so overworked that they didn't manage to do some fun stuff with you? Or shall we go after church and go for a nice walk? And so this is something that we need to understand the behavior. It helps us understand why a child is acting up. But it doesn't necessarily mean children have to color and have fun in church the whole time. But the needs have to be fulfilled before they come to church, so that they can have their full attention on what they're being taught in Sabbath school. And this is the challenge. When we have children whose needs are not met, we can tell that pretty quickly in Sabbath school, because they are acting out. So it is our duty not to just say, your child is a problem child because they're acting out in Sabbath school all the time. But it's our problem to say, well, what's going on? How can I help? How can I support you during the week so your child is able to take up whatever they're supposed to learn? So this is it requires us to walk this extra mile and to recognize that children are acting up for a reason. They're not acting up because they want to be bad. But children want to be good, naturally. So when children are acting up, it's our duty to ask why.
And you would be comfortable asking a mother, like, I don't know how you would say that, but say to a parent, okay, your child is disruptive, not talking about a small child, 7, 8-year-old. The child is disruptive. What can I do so the child is less disruptive?
Yeah. Well, build a relationship. Build a relationship with the child, right? Say, how are you doing today? Are you okay? And then pretty quickly children will open up to you once they know that they are safe with you and they can trust you. You build a relationship with your brother and sister in church. So you know that they're going through a hard time right now. And the least you can do is you pray for them. You say, well, I will pray for you because you don't even have to tell me what's going on, but I can see that something is going on. So, if you want to talk, I'm here. If you need any help, let me know. So this is the beauty of having this church community, because we build the connection. We are here with a unique opportunity to build connection. So a teacher in school will have a very hard time to build a real connection with parents and children and go the extra mile because, it takes time and they have 30 kids in class. But we here at church, we have this network. We're brothers and sisters. We talk, we meet each other every week. So we can build that relationship with each other, and we know then what's going on, and we can support each other in the way that we can build the safest and the best and the most loving spot possible for children. Yeah.
I was interested in one of the slides that you talked about discipline, like having discipline or something like that. I was interested in that, and I'm looking at child guidance, and it says here, Ellen White wrote, children will be far happier under proper discipline than if left to do as their own brain possess. And the passage she's talking about from babyhood, we should be training our children to be obedient from babyhood. And she gives us so much guidance about how we should be doing that as well. And I think, as Adventists, one of our uniqueness and our distinctness is because we've got the spirit of prophecy, and often we do not study, not just read, but study the spirit of prophecy to fully understand how we should be educating ourselves, how we should be training our children, how we should be looking after our bodies, how we should be evangelizing, how we should be managing our money. There's so much guidance there, and there's so much guidance on how we should be raising our children. When I listen to you, I listen to you very intently. Some of it is against what Sister White is saying in child guidance?
Well, it did not say that it's against discipline, and it did not say it's against obedience. I think that you did not listen that intently, because obedience and discipline is, of course, very important. And this is about how we can make children obey better, how we can give them the skills to be obedient, how we can give them the skills to be more disciplined, because it takes skill. Discipline and correction without a relationship, discipline and correction without love, will drive children out of church. But discipline and correction with love, with a relationship, with a safe space, that will keep children in church. Now, for me, it is very important that children are entertained in church throughout, but that they learn how to sit still. This is important. This is a life skill. Okay, children need to learn memory verses. It's a life skill. Children need to learn how to take part in community. They need to learn how to be helpful. I went door to door every single Sabbath when I grew up. It was a very tough environment, and this was important. It's a life skill. But these life skills need to be done with joy and not with grudge. These life skills need to be taught because we want to do them, because we want to please our parents. These things need to be done out of joy for the gospel. And how do we instill this? We don't instill this by, being upset and mad at them all the time. But, obedience and discipline are important, but needs need to be met in order to have this obedience and discipline. Yes?
Well, I found the Phoenix cups quite useful, and I wish I could see. I've just looked at it.
It's okay.
Found it on Email, and I'm going to go away and fill my cup more of the garden. because I understand why we have the message to young people, and we have, I'm sure most of us, ready, digested it. But I just wonder, as a church, as parents, have we got it right? Because if 90%, if not 95% of our young people are still leaving the church, and we're giving them doses, cupfuls of energy, why? Maybe we haven't, but something's going wrong. Because if we're still saying that beat a child until spare the rod and restore the child, as sometimes we do, or at least many of us have experienced, them getting it wrong. Many people getting it from what they call the Word of God.
Yeah.
So, it questions, there is a balance, I agree, there is a balance somewhere, and filling this full cup, or the other cups which I wasn't able to register all of it, might actually, I don't know if she does or not, but NTY might not advocate beating, but it seems that a lot of Adventists do, unfortunately. I'm not one of them. But what I'm simply saying is that I think there is a balance somewhere that we all need to incorporate and understand. And I would like a bit more of that to understand.
So right now, for example, we're doing Message Church. This is a safe and fun and a good way to teach children the Word of God. And it fills all the cups, basically, right? But that doesn't mean that we do Message Church during divine service. It doesn't mean we do Message Church every day, all day. It just means we do it at some point, so children like coming back. Now, when we look at youth programs, and I know South Shields have a youth director, so you would probably disagree with me right now, but what is our youth ministry doing? They're playing a lot of games. so youth ministry today is a lot about fun. And I think there's where there's a lot of balance missing. Because youth ministry for me is also about service. It's also about responsibility, social responsibility. Put young people to work, But this is how we instill life skills. Because, again, we need to have the skill to fulfill the needs and not learn. So when we have the need for joy and we only play games, that is not a sustainable skill to fulfill that need. But when we learn, we find joy in service. We find joy in interaction. We find joy in community. We find joy in teaching. Then we have a sustainable skill to fulfill that need. And it's all about the skills, how we can fill those needs. So when we think about Fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Those are skills. Those are skills, and those are sustainable skills to fulfill our needs. So to fill the fun cup, we can't watch comedy all day, which is not sustainable and not healthy, by the way. But finding real joy is a skill. Finding joy in the Word of God is a skill. So it is up to us as parents to teach the skills that are sustainable, that are good for kids, not just temporary skills. So of course, when we look at different needs, hungry, right? You're hungry, and you eat a Mars bar or something, something horribly unhealthy, which is not good, and it will satisfy you for what, 1 minute, and then what? But the sustainable skill that we teach is to have the real food, to have healthy behaviors, healthy lifestyle, which will fulfill the wellness, the physical wellness for a long term. So this is the difference. So not just a short-term quick fix, but a skill to fulfill the needs in a way that is good, that is also pleasing to the Lord. So here's where the obedience and where the discipline comes in. Okay, but the thing is this: we cannot teach anything without building a relationship first. So when Jesus was walking with the apostles, he built a relationship with people. And then he was teaching, he was healing and preaching. So he didn't preach before he healed, but he healed before he preached. So there is a balance, and I'm happy that you use the word balance, because the balance is what actually gives us the sustainable life skills to fulfill the needs. So unfortunately, today's society goes very, very fast into cheap, quick, unsustainable, terrible life fixes that don't fix anything. And suddenly you have a society full of broken people that don't know how to help themselves because they have never learned the skills of real joy, of real health, of real safety, of real trust, because they have not learned that and they haven't been taught. And this is where we have the responsibility. Yeah.
I was going to say that I think context is a very key word.
Yeah.
Even when we interpret scripture, the Old Testament context is different to the times we're living in. The New Testament is a whole different culture to the Old Testament times. We're in the 21st century. If I'm going to say, literally, spare the rod and spoil the child, and beat that child, the authorities will step in and take the child away. How would they have served God in raising that child when it's taken away? So context. You have to be able to apply. I don't believe that truth ever changes. God's truth is truth. But the application of that truth is what changes, because we live in a dynamic world. As the world changes, we need to be able to apply that truth in the context of the times that we're living in.
That's right. So
your presentation, for instance, if you presented that in the early church, they would have thrown you out.
Of course.
That's a bad pamper. You're pampering the children. It's unacceptable, because then the context was discipline was a key there, right? And the culture allows it in the day, because that's the context of the times we were living in. But today, it sounds more palatable to me even as a parent, because I can apply those things, knowing that I'm not going to risk my child being harmed, I'm not going to risk my child being taken away, and yet I will still achieve God's purpose in trying to ensure the child is disciplined, the child's needs are met, so that the child can grow both spiritually and physically in a safe environment.
That's right. So again, it's about sustainable life skills. So a hungry child cannot learn. You cannot teach a hungry child anything, because right now their priority is to fill their tummy. And this is exactly the concept behind it. The needs have to be met in order to reach the child, also spiritually. Yeah.
No, just back to something that we discussed before. I came to this country at, I don't know, 22, when I came to study. Came to study that first year. And then I came back at 25 to work. And I'm still not convinced that the cuddly type of parenting works. I haven't seen yet
that when they get to university, they don't either leave church or they've kind of left before. But just like again, look at the behaviors and see that they're not spiritually grounded. They're just waiting for the opportunity to be out of their parents' household. So, like you said, it's about finding that way that's sustainable. Too often, we look for our children to have fun at church. So going to a church that's enjoyable and fun, and the children are lost because they're not doctrinally sound. The reason that many of us are here now is because church was not fun, but it was doctrine-based. Now, churches are more trying to accommodate for the young people, trying to be more inclusive, even, I'm still kind of working through my mind on these care groups ideas, but is it doctrinally deep? If it's not doctrinally deep, the child will have a good time eating, they will have a good time talking, they'll have a good time socializing, and eventually they will no longer need those things. So when they go away, they don't connect, if that makes sense. So that's really more of my concern. I do agree that if the child has a stable upbringing and their cups are, that their needs are being met, that's fine. But I think that as parents, as myself, if I look at myself, we are so doctrinally weak. If we have worship, we may have worship, that box is ticked, we may have morning, evening worship, but when we look at the spirituality of our children, it's nothing like our spirituality, and we struggled a bit. How much more will they not struggle with the amount of exposure? So I don't know how we can try to balance the two to make sure that at the end of the day, church can be boring, but when you go off to university, you're looking for a church because that's in you. Or church could be lots of fun, and then you go off to university and that church is not as fun, so you want to go to that church. And that church is not as fun. I'm looking for the fun church. And all of my friends who did that were lost. Well, not lost. They're out of the church. You know, we say it in the end. But they all left church because often it was either facilitated by the parent who was saying, oh, my child is looking for the fun church. And they found a fun church in the north of the country, and then nobody knew they weren't going to church because you didn't see them for weeks. So, yeah, it just troubles me because the last thing I'll say is when we came, Wally and I, when we came to this church, I was 25, he was 27 or 28. 28. And below us, 10 years below us, there was really nobody. And 10 years above us, I'm thinking who's there now, there really was nobody. And still, 10 years later, almost 10 years later, there is nobody. And when I say people, I'm talking about people who are doctrinally sound, that you can actually have a Bible study with. So you then end up in this space of feeling emptiness and all of these parenting methods and techniques. And I don't know if they're working to save our children or if they're just keeping our children here while they're under our roof. So that's my...
See, I could not have, I could not have said it better. You said it in so many words, but you're 100% right. And this is exactly what I said earlier. You know, if we just make church fun and games, we do not bring anything that is of substance. So church is not there, it's not an entertainment thing. Now the problem is, post-pandemic, how many people have come back to actual church? And how many people are still at home in their pajamas watching whatever they like on YouTube? Say they go to church around the globe because that sermon is better. Oh, I don't like the speaker, let me switch on Hope channel. This has happened. This has happened as adults. So it's not just the young people that go to study somewhere else, don't find a fun church and don't go anymore. This has happened to us. This is real. And you're absolutely right. When we're not doctrinally sound, if we don't say, well, the church is with people, the church is right here, the church is where I'm planted, here's where I have my roots. I cannot just pick and choose because God has a special message for me here. Then, we have failed not only as adults but also as parents. So I fully understand where you're coming from. And this is exactly what I mean, sustainable skills to fulfill the need, not just with fun and games and sweets and cool stuff, but actually finding ways to fill our needs in a way that lasts, to find lasting joy. So when Paul talks about joy and suffering, right, this is joy that is different. That is not joy because of fun, but this is true joy that only God can give. So this is why we say we have to build a relationship with young people. Those young people will stay in church if they have a relationship. But if they're being shushed all the time, and if nobody actually bothers to have a chat with them, to sit down, talk, how are you doing? Are you okay? How can I help you? What's moving you right now? Let's talk about a difficult subject. What are you struggling with in the Bible right now? Let's talk about this. Well, then we have a problem. But it's the same thing. So young people leave the church if they don't have a relationship with the people in church, and they also leave the church if they don't find substance that gives them the real, lasting thing. So this is up to us. So we need to teach the skills to fulfill the needs. If we let children choose how they can fulfill their needs best, things will go wrong very quickly. This is why we need to teach the sustainable skills to fill those needs. Yeah.
I'm just going off the tangent a bit.
Yes, please.
And it's in response to the presentation of the strategic plan that the NEC has.
There you go.
And I think they have 3 objectives, I think. And the first one was...
a lot more objectives.
Yeah,
Don't worry.
3 themes, I can't remember, but the first one was about trust. Yes. And I was wondering, I think both yourself and Sissy Douglas talked about the other ones, how they can respond to that. But they wasn't really touched on how the church is going to rebuild trust. And the reason why I mentioned that is because you talked about when we had COVID, the churches was closed, a lot of people have not come back. And I know that a lot of people felt let down by the conferences because they closed and there was no support. The pastors were on furlough,
Exactly.
where the pastors came to see all the members, encouraged them to sign up to return their tithes the electronic way and help them to sign up and set it up direct debit. But then they said, well, I can't pray with you because I'm on furlough. You know, these are stories.
It makes my ears curl. It's terrible.
So I know it's Pastor Kumi who's dealing with that element of it. So I just wondered what is the plan for the church to rebuild trust amongst the laity across the NC?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I remember because we moved here in February 2020. We moved to the UK, and we moved here, and we couldn't go out. It was terrible. Now the thing is, because Julian was just a new employee, he was the only one that wasn't legally allowed to be on furlough. So overnight, he suddenly had 12 churches, and that was great. So he was on the phone 24/7. So this was not the way. I have to say this about. Let's say it's the old administration. It's always convenient to be able to say that, but it was not a wise decision to furlough the pastors. I can say that for sure. Now rebuilding trust and recovering from that one is very difficult because I remember in Germany we had the same situation. My parents have not been visited once. They're in their 80s. They have not received a single pastor in 3 or 4 years now, and they're disappointed, So I totally understand, and this is exactly what I mean. Building trust can only happen through personal relationships. Now, one of the key performance indicators of this is, this is why we're here in Area 1. This is why we have all the directors and the leadership coming here to actually stand here and engage in conversations, to spend a full day or a full weekend to actually talk, to actually get to know each other. This is why we're tingling around right now, the NEC, to just really go there and build the relationship with the people. Because in the end, saying you can trust me actually will make you trust me less, right? But if I say don't trust me yet, let's build a relationship first, that will actually be a bit more trustworthy. So this is the problem. So building trust is a tricky one, especially coming back from a lot of hurt, from a lot of pain, from a lot of disappointment. And that will not happen overnight, and that will not happen in a year's time either. So this is where we're all called to actually support each other and to pray for each other, that we actually manage to do this. Now, I don't want to bash the pastors all the time here, but did church members visit each other?
Yes.
So this is the good thing. So we had some churches where this really worked, and we had some churches where it totally didn't work. And unfortunately, this is where we were all called. So we had some churches where soup kitchens sprang up out of somebody's backyard, where we had a Zoom choir coming up. We had so many different activities. So there was good and bad. Now, and here's the thing, here's the snag. The reason people did not return to church was because suddenly they received such a warm welcome in an online community that they felt better there. Right? There's a reason. Again, there's a reason. We cannot just say doctrinally you have to come to church without asking why. There must have been a reason why they didn't return. Now in Birmingham it was the road tax of £8 every Sabbath, but in other churches where suddenly the membership was cut in half, there was a reason why they wouldn't come, because they didn't feel so welcome in the first place. So this is why building a relationship and a connection is so important. And this is the beautiful gem, the present that God has given us. He has given us the church. The church as a connection place, as a safe space, as a place where children can grow up loved and know that they're always welcome, always loved. This is beautiful. And we just need to keep that gem and polish it and treasure it and keep this beautiful church as a bride to Jesus. The church is the bride of Jesus. It is in the book of Revelation. This is so beautiful. But we don't treasure it this way. Yeah.
So we have to let me rephrase that. So we all agree that you have to have a balance between no judgment in the church and also have a sense of obligation to come to the church. So how would you know, how would the adults know that how would they know that they have the balance right before it's too late, before the child leaves? How would they know that?
Well, usually we learn the hard way, unfortunately. And the thing is, no judgment is not possible because we're humans. Everybody judges everybody. This is just our nature.
Okay.
But this is why Jesus has come and told us, well, fine, judge us, but with love. Like if you say, okay, fine, you're a sinner, but so am I, then that takes the whole tension out of a conversation. So with Jesus, you can come to Jesus as you are, but you can't stay as you are. So this is where we need to, we have responsibility. We have responsibility. Of course, we don't want to judge people who come to church, but we have the responsibility to help them along in their growth towards Jesus. Nobody will come to church perfect, but it is our responsibility to help them become perfect in Jesus' eyes, and that can only happen once we build a trusted and safe relationship with them. If I tell a young person, you cannot come to church in jeans, well, then they will say, okay, I will not come to church then. So this is a very crude and very simple example, but this is how it happens, right? So if this is when the fronts become very hard and, well, I'm not coming to church if there are no drums. I'm not coming to church if it's no